just start with you there. President Putin's decision to retaliate, how surprised were you?
I find it odd, Craig, to say that he's taking the high road. It was he and his country that purposely undermined, to the extent that they could, the U.S. presidential election and tried to tip the scales to Donald Trump. So the notion that somehow he's deciding not to expel U.S. diplomats, maybe it's an admission of guilt, but the suggestion that it's the high road, that somehow he's the good guy out of this, I find a bit twisted, to be perfectly honest. As equally twisted is Donald Trump's response. Incidentally, nothing suggests seriousness about an issue when you, other than appearing with Don King, right? But for Trump seems to be in either denial or, this notion that was a 400-pound guy sitting in his bed may be responsible. And now he's sort of saying, well, computers aren't reliable. There's something very odd going on here. And I go back to what John Podesta said last week on Meet the Press is we need to get to the bottom of what did the Trump campaign know and when did they know it about all this stealing. Hacking is a nice term. It's stealing of U.S. documents.
No, well, you're not one of these folks that believes that Russia isn't involved. I mean, you aren't one of those folks.
No, I'm not. You're good on that.
Okay.
But what I will say are there are two ways that Donald Trump can play this. And number one, the Republicans really criticized Obama because they thought he was weak on foreign policy. Well, look what Obama has done. He's really, pushed it to it with a strong fist and said America's back in play, and you're not going to hack us, and we're not standing for it. So here's what I'm going to do. Now, if Donald Trump, when he takes office, if he takes the sanctions away, then that makes it look like he's starting off making America weaker with their foreign policy. There's another way that Donald Trump could also play this, and this is by bargaining. Maybe he says, I'll remove some of the sanctions if you remove your military presence in something like maybe the Ukraine.
And we know that Mr. Trump is certainly transactional.
Yep.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he thinks that the sanctions don't go far enough, Richard. He said in a statement, in part, the Obama administration for 8 years attempted to reset relations with Russia and sat passively while Russia expanded its sphere of influence. Sanctions against the Russian intelligence services are a good initial step. However, late in coming, it almost sounds as if Senator McConnell would like to see even more done. What impact will the strong congressional response have on a President Trump after he assumes office? Do we think that it will have the kind of political capital to roll back any or all of these sanctions if he even wanted to?
Well, I think you can forecast a few things, Craig. One, I think there's probably going to be a proposed resolution, if not proposed by Republicans or by Democrats, to keep the sanctions in place or make them harder. And we'll see how Republicans in Congress line up, especially if Donald Trump says, no, that's not something that he wants to do. Secondly, what do you think the response would have been from Republican leaders had President Obama imposed these sanctions back in October when it became public that the Russians were behind this hacking? You think they would have been very even-handed and say, oh, this was a little late, but better late than never? Heck no. They would have basically said, you're trying to tip the scales. How dare you? So, look, I think President Obama is trying to do what he can. And the notion of somehow boxing Donald Trump in, he's talking about repealing all these Obama executive orders on day one. He could repeal this one. If he's such a tough guy, we'll see.
Noel, it really does seem like this is a situation where President Obama would have been, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, if Richard raises a good point there, had he done something back in late October, he would have been seen as rigging the election. He waits until now, and you've got, a bunch of congressional leaders saying, well, it's too little, too late, or it's just too late.
Well, I think the one person that is really upset that he didn't do it a lot sooner is Hillary Clinton. I mean, she could have really, maybe possibly benefited from that. We'll never know. But I think that is the one complaint. A lot of Republicans are wondering, why didn't you do this, a while back? But needless to say, it's done now. And removing the sanctions, that's going to be the burden of Donald Trump. And I really do not think that Donald Trump